I didn't have to shave my mustache for the Olympics, but I did have to shave my mustache for Disney.
Welcome back to the My Defining Moments podcast. My guest for this episode is a man who loves the Olympics pretty much more than I do. John Naber is a US swimming legend. At the 1976 Olympic Games, he won 4 golds and 1 silver, becoming the most decorated Olympian in Montreal that summer. The 2 backstroke world records he set at those games stood for 7 years. Having retired at just 21, he went on to work at Disneyland before stepping into sports broadcasting. He still supports the Olympic movement by presiding over the US Olympic Alumni Association, and he also worked for the organising committee for the 1984 Games in Los Angeles. We've got so much to discuss, so let's listen to John's defining moments. So hi John, thank you for joining me on My Defining Moments podcast. How are you today?
I'm feeling great. I just got out of the pool, so I had a good workout, and any day that begins with a swim is a good day.
So you're still very much swimming as normal?
Well, no, I don't do it as often or nearly as hard as I used to do it, but I still enjoy it, and I think that's the important part.
Exactly. As long as you're still enjoying it, that is the main thing. Obviously, this year's been a bit strange. How have you coped in the last year with the pandemic, and how's life in Pasadena?
Well, thank you for asking. We're healthy. I'm scheduled to get my vaccine tomorrow, my first dose.
Oh, wow.
Life in that sense it was looking pretty good. I had planned a trip to Europe in 2020, which of course had to be canceled. So I'm eager to return to Europe sometime in 2021, if at all possible. So I'm looking forward to that. I've had a home office for 40 years. So working out of the home has not been a huge adjustment for me. But I do love taking my wife out to dinner, and that has been a bit of a challenge. But generally speaking, compared to many, COVID has been a very small disruption in my life, so I really can't complain.
That's good to hear, and good to hear you getting the vaccine as well. That's that's very reassuring.
Thank you.
Well, you mentioned there you want to travel to Europe, and just going back to the beginning of your journey in your life. You seemed to travel around quite a lot when you were growing up. How hard was that, moving around all the time?
Well, I'm the second of 4 children. My father and mother. My father was a management consultant for an American company that had international clients. And so when I was 4, we left the United States and went to Italy and lived in Italy for 4 years. And then we moved to England, and I lived in Epsom, just outside of London, for 3 years. And every summer we would vacation someplace. And when I was 10, I had the chance to visit Olympia, Greece, on an ocean cruise, and I think that was the first defining moment in my life because I was introduced to the Olympic movement and the ideals of the Olympic movement, which I think really put my focus of attention and my direction in a very positive way.
Yeah. So this is your first defining moment that you chose. You were 10 years old. You said you went to Greece and you visited Olympia. Obviously, you eventually became on to become an Olympian, an Olympic champion. So was that the first seed kind of sown in your mind that this was going to be your life?
Absolutely, but it wasn't for the reasons you might think. Our tour guide in Olympia, Greece, explained that the athletes marched through a tunnel before they entered the competitive arena, the stadium. And in that tunnel, he said, there were statues on either side carved of athletes who had been caught cheating in earlier games. This was not a hall of fame. This was a hall of shame. And the cost of those statues was billed to the athlete's hometown. And as a result, the stigma of being caught cheating the consequence was so severe that the Olympic Games were relatively cheat-free. I don't know relatively, but the goal of the Olympic Games was not to honor the excellent, but rather to encourage the devoted and to honor the gods with our character and sportsmanship. So I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, this is so cool. This movement is all about character. I want to be an Olympian someday. And she looked at me with her eyebrows raised and said, What sport? And I said, I have no idea. I don't know what sport's going to send me to the Olympics. I just want to be a part of that movement. And it wasn't for another 3 years before I discovered the sport of swimming. And probably 3 years after that I realized that I might become an Olympian in swimming. but I always loved the Olympic movement for its ideals. Yeah, we fall short of the ideals on occasion, but it's nice to have a goal in mind. And I think that moment set my life on a trajectory that produced the results that I ended up having.
So which was the first Olympics you remember watching then as a child?
Actually, 1972. I'd heard about the 68 Olympics, but I didn't watch them. The 72 Games of Munich, as it turned out, I had a chance to make that team. I came close, did not qualify, but watched them on television and watched Mark Spitz win 7 gold medals. And the monumental accomplishment of that, the following morning I looked at my face in the mirror as I was brushing my teeth and said, wow, seven gold medals. That's remarkable. I'd love to win even one. And I heard a little voice in the back of my mind saying, why not? Why not? Who wrote the book that said you can never win a gold medal? So having no answer to the why not question, I began thinking, well, maybe so. Maybe it's possible. And that probably changed my life again for the better, because I began believing in the possibility of me not merely being an Olympian, but being a gold medalist, being the best in the world at something. And that's very exciting for a 16-year-old boy to realize it's possible you might be declared the best in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. But you said obviously it took you a while to kind of find the sport that was going to take you to the Olympics. Had you tried other sports? Were you always quite active as a child? I mean, how did swimming find you, or did you find swimming?
I've always been rather tall and rather lean. My mom said if you draw a chalk line on the sidewalk, I would trip over it and fall down. I'm not very athletic. I'm not the most athletic member of my household. First day of high school PE, because I was so tall, I was the first kid picked for the basketball team. And on the second day of high school PE, I was the last kid picked for the basketball team. You know, being tall is my only asset, but I'm not a land mammal. But I did discover swimming, and though I wasn't good immediately, I got better very quickly. I laughingly say I won the most improved award on my team 3 years in a row. I was that bad when I started, but I kept getting better with every year. And, 2 weeks would go by and my best time would improve by 5 seconds. So I said, wow, if I just keep this up for another 10 weeks, I'll break a world record. Now that wasn't rational, and my progress it was not a linear progress. It was more a hyperbolic progress. But generally speaking, I believed in the concept of getting better. And of course, the Olympic movement, Citius, Altius, Fortius, isn't swiftest, highest, strongest. It's swifter, higher, stronger. It's all about getting better. And so my love of the Olympic ideals and my belief in progress and improvement kept me going. And I didn't have to win a lot of races in the early going, but pretty quickly I started winning my share, and success came relatively easy to me.
So when was that kind of light bulb moment when you were kind of thinking, okay, I found my sport, I'm actually really good at this, and then, the Olympics is something that you've always dreamed of, and then you could actually, if you trained hard enough, you could make it?
I always wanted to be good. I always believed it was possible. But the moment it became likely in my mind was one of my other defining moments. When I was doing a workout, we were doing 10 sets of 200-yard swims with inner tubes wrapped around our ankles and paddles on our hands. It's called a pulling set. And generally speaking, it's hard to pull as fast as you can swim. But we were doing these 10 sets, and after 9, the coach stopped the workout, and he pulled me over and he whispered in my ear. He said, John, on this number 10, show them what can be done. And the concept of show them what can be done elevated my thinking. He didn't say show them what you can do. He said show them what can be done. And he maybe unintentionally said, John, you might be able to do something no one's ever been able to do before. And it awakened in me the belief that I could be the best in the world. And that was a very defining moment in my life as well.
So yeah, you mentioned this as a defining moment. Probably your second defining moment is that this Coach Hastings kind of just sowed that seed in your mind. And how influential was it to have all these great coaches throughout your career helping you to this level of success?
Well, I laughingly said I had more than 5 swimming coaches in my life. And had they come into my life in a different order, I might have not been nearly as successful. The first coach was a biology teacher who knew very little about swimming, but he knew a lot about motivation. And he kept it fun, so he kept me going in a period when I was not enjoying a lot of success. The next coach, George French, was a fundamental expert. He got in the water with a scuba diving faceplate so that he could be half above the water and half below the water, and he could watch my stroke mechanics. Most coaches watch from above the water, but he was looking at both, and he was able to make subtle corrections so that my mechanics, my fundamentals, were virtually perfect. And those building blocks, if you have good fundamentals, then there's almost no limit to how far you can go. Later, high school coaches kept me going. Mike Hastings elevated my thinking to be the best in the world. Peter Daland at USC encouraged me to be good at more than just one stroke. Good, John, you're a great backstroker. You've got an American record. That's great. But I need you to score points in the freestyle as well. And so he forced me to expand my opportunities, which, at the Olympics produced another two gold medals. 40% of my medal haul was because of that. And then on the Olympic team, Doc Councilman, Dr. James E. Councilman was the head U.S. coach, and he really taught us about elevating letting the rising tide lift all boats. And he helped us work as a team so that we were not competing against the other Americans. We were helping the Americans compete against the rest in the world, and that produced some remarkable swimming results in Montreal, where the American men in 13 events were unable to win but 1 gold, 1 silver, and 6 of the bronze. We swept every other possible medal because of Doc Councilman's encouragement. So had they come to me in a different order, I don't know that I would have enjoyed the sport as much in the early going and may not have lasted as long as I did. So I'm just grateful for the multitude of skills and the multitude of talents that came my way.
You mentioned USC there. Was it a big choice? Did you have many options of which college to go to?
Well, I don't know if that was a defining moment, but as a junior in high school, I was the big man on campus, the best swimmer on the team, and I was showing off by bouncing on the 1-meter springboard, yelling at the underclassmen to put in the lane ropes, attach the lane lines to both ends of the pool. And they have this metal ratchet that tightens them so that they're virtually as tight as a guitar string. And right then the coach came in and said, "Naber, get off the board and get in the pool. Let's get to work." Well, directly in front of the diving board was one of the lane ropes. So I could not dive forward, so I aimed a little bit to the side. And on a single bounce, I would have landed square in the middle of lane 1 and begun my workout. But because I had been showing off, I was bouncing on the springboard like a trampoline, and I had loaded it with so much propulsion that it literally allowed me to miss the water. I hit the deck and broke a collarbone and was out for the season, my junior year in high school, 1972, the Olympic year. And that's the main year of college recruiting. College coaches look at 2 years out and begin their recruiting efforts. And as a result, no colleges knew about me until my senior year of high school, when I'd broken an American record in the backstroke. And all of a sudden, people wanted to recruit me to join the different schools. But by then, I had limited my choices to the 3 swimming schools in California at the time, were Stanford, UCLA, and USC. And so it was a relatively easy decision for me to go to USC. It was away from home. I lived very close to Stanford, and I didn't want Mom to do my laundry. So I went down to Southern California. And I chose USC for a multitude of reasons, and it turned out that it was the right choice for me. We, as an incoming freshman class, were undefeated for 4 years. We won the national title 4 years in a row. And Peter Daland was the perfect coach for me at that time. So I was fortunate. I made a good choice, and it paid off for me very handsomely. And then after the 4 years of college, I retired from swimming, but I stayed in Southern California because the 1984 Olympics were coming, and I wanted to be somewhere near the Olympic movement. I didn't plan to compete, but I hoped that I might be a broadcaster and talk about the Olympics. And so it was a pleasure to stick around in Southern California, and I still live in the Pasadena area, which is famous for that Rose Parade and Rose Bowl football game that occurs on the first of every year. So we're Southern California natives now.
Just going back to your studies, actually, what did you study your degree in? What was your academic side of things like?
When I entered USC, one of my favorite television shows was a sitcom called Bewitched with Elizabeth Montgomery and Dick York and Darren Stevens, the husband in the show, was an advertising agent. He would create advertising campaigns, and I thought that was an interesting career. So I wanted to go and study advertising. Well, public relations, PR, at USC, the letter PR didn't mean public relations. It meant press release, where you would write for the student newspaper and you'd have to do things of that nature. So I didn't have a field of study that worked for me. So I ended up taking psychology as my degree. And psychology was a degree where the classrooms on Tuesday, the knowledge I gained on Tuesday was applicable on a date Wednesday night. I could use that knowledge. And I think that psychology has been one of my assets. I like to think about how people think. I like to try to put myself in their minds. I was fascinated in sport with the sports psychology, psyching out the competition, what words to use, all of those things. And that career benefited me plenty in my future life.
Yeah, it sounds like that's the perfect marriage in a way. Psychology is such a huge part of sport, and especially more recently, it seems to be what a lot of people are focusing on. But also around that time when you were in your mid to late teens, going on to your third defining moment was when they said the day you accepted Christ and your faith. Can you just have a little bit of talk about that and the important book that you discovered around that time as well?
This was my last year in high school. The year after I had broken my collarbone and was unable to swim that year, I devoted my time to enter student politics, and I was elected student body president for my high school. And one of the responsibilities of such a president is the obligation to introduce speakers who would come visit our campus. And a Hell's Angel, an ex-Hell's Angel, who had become a Billy Graham evangelist, came to campus, and I had to sit in the front row, introduce him, and it would be rude to leave the auditorium, so I sat and I listened to what he had to say. And he had been a former drug addict, and he claimed to have killed people, and he found redemption in his relationship with Christ. And I wasn't a drug addict. I didn't drink much booze. I wasn't a big party boy. I didn't relate to the guy. But then he challenged the audience. He said, if you ask Christ into your heart in the privacy of your bedroom and nothing happens, what have you lost? I couldn't argue with the thinking, so that night I said, Jesus, if you're real, come into my heart. And I'd love to say that the window blew open and a dove landed on my shoulders, but nothing quite so picturesque happened. But it created in me a curiosity to learn more. And it created in me a desire to be with other people who thought the way I did. And I found a peer group that shared my values. And I started, reading more, and looking back on it, psychologically speaking, become a Christian was the perfect sports psychology metaphor. And let me explain. I believe that the optimum psychological state for any athlete is high incentive and low pressure. If you really want to do well, but you're not afraid of doing poorly, you will be at the ultimate psychological state. And my relationship with Christ gave me unconditional love. Unconditional love lowers the pressure, but a desire to please Him increased my incentive. And those two elements gave me, I think, an attitude that people at the time thought was rather peculiar. That I didn't march around the pool deck with a focus and blinders on. I was waving at the crowd and having a good time. And one of the other athletes on the American team called me a fruitcake. I was just, too giddy, too funny, too silly. But I was perfectly comfortable in my own skin. And as a result, I think that I enjoyed the races, and I don't think I ever got psyched out. I'd like to say that I didn't try to psych out the competition, but in retrospect, I probably did, by looking and acting so goofy and trying to be friends with everybody and hugging my competition. That might have been a little peculiar for their point of view, but it worked for me. And that relationship with Christ gave me a solid footing and I think a balanced view of myself. I don't know that I'm humble, but I do know that I don't consider myself God. I am. I think I have that balance relatively correct, and knowing how perfect He was, allows me to view world records in backstroke in their proper perspective. I'm not a sinless creature. I'm a human being who makes mistakes. And the ability to swim quickly while on your back has limited value in society at large. It's not a skill that saves people's lives or creates artwork for the future generations, but it was something I could do, and I did it well, and it was just a part of my life.
Yeah, I agree. I think perspective is such a huge thing, especially in sport. Some people do get too, down with the pressure and focus, and sometimes you do just need to take a step back and think, I am just swimming backwards in a pool.
Yeah, and if you followed Michael Phelps since his Olympics, he's made quite a point in saying that depression is a significant issue psychologically for him and maybe many others. And in fact, he's encouraged the US Olympic Committee to devote more resources to mental health preparations or issues. And so now the US Olympic Committee has psychologists on call because the athletes are having to deal with, I think, an imbalance in proportion. And that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people I've spoken to on this podcast already have said the same things, like the Olympic gold is all they're chasing, and then when they retire, it's what's next? Where do I go next?
If you put all your eggs in that one basket, even after you get that basket full, you still feel empty. After a couple of weeks, you still feel empty. So I believe the Bible talks about life being a three-braided cord, or think of it as a three-legged stool. Your mind, your body, and your spirit. And those three things keep you balanced. You take away any one of them, and you're a little tipsy. You take away two of them, and you're bound to fall.
You also mentioned the book, The Road Less Traveled. Was that an important part of your youth as well?
Well, in my psychology studies at USC, we were required to read lots of books, and The Road Less Traveled gave me a building block upon which I think I've been able to live my life. And that building block was his definition of the word love is the willingness to personally sacrifice for somebody else's betterment. I mean, the word love in English is now so overused. We love hot dogs and we love, being outdoors in the sun. But when you love somebody as a human being, and then I'm dealing with this, God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And so I'm trying to understand this concept of love and sacrifice. It enabled me to use, or rather, it made me think about my post-athletic career. How could I demonstrate God's love? And it's by the willingness to sacrifice for somebody else's betterment. It's not just make them happy. So when I got married and have a child, my love for my daughter doesn't want to relieve her of pain and make her happy all the time. I want her, and I should be willing to sacrifice. She needs to dislike me for disciplining her for things because it's in her best interest that I force her to do her homework, right? So that's a gesture. That's a demonstration of love. And if all I do is reward her and stroke her ego and help build her self-esteem without factual underpinning, I'm not doing her any favors, right? So anyway, that concept, I think, helped define where I felt I could be of service going forward. I've had a wonderful career, and technically I'm probably easing toward retirement now that I'm old enough to get a vaccine. But I can still benefit society in a lot of different ways by sacrificing myself for their best interests. So I serve on a lot of nonprofit organizations. I've chaired a few. I'm trying to help other people as well as do what's right. I don't know, that's a little patting myself on the back a little bit, but I believe in that philosophy.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It sounds like a very good philosophy to live your life by. But yeah, just going straight back into your swimming career, just as it was taking off, you mentioned Mark Spitz earlier in 1972. Were you old enough to compete in the national trials that year?
Well, remember, that was the year I broke my collarbone. So I was out of the water from March until May, and the US Olympic team trials were in July. Between May and July, I swam against Roland Mathis, the East German defending Olympic champion, at a Santa Clara swim meet. He won, of course. I got fifth or something, but I qualified to compete in the US Olympic team trials held in Portage Park outside of Chicago in 1972. At that meet, they took the top 3 Americans in each event. And I finished 5th, 0.6 of a second too slow to make the team. And some people said, John, had you not been hurt on the diving board, you probably would have made the Olympic team. And that might be true. But in retrospect, I look back at that defining moment when I broke my collarbone as a benefit, because here's what I think. I think had I gone to the Olympics in Munich, I might have won a bronze medal, and that might have satisfied my appetite. Because I did not yet believe I could be the best in the world, a bronze medal would have been great. A high school kid goes to the Olympics, wins an Olympic medal. I think that's possible that I could have been happy with that. Because I was denied that, I was really hungry, and later on I was able to believe that I could show them what can be done. I was able to believe I could be the best in the world, and then I was encouraged to be more than just a backstroker, so I developed skills in other areas. So in my opinion, I don't know if this go over well, but I think that it was part of God's plan to deny me a spot on the Munich Olympic team so as to allow me to be a much more significant force in Montreal.
And obviously watching what Mark Spitz did as well in 72, did that make you think about trying a bit more freestyle and trying to get into more relay teams and things like that?
I never thought I had a shot at 7 Olympic medals. In fact, Sports Illustrated wrote an article about me a month before the US Olympic trials, and it said John Naber is America's greatest hope, and he could win, get this, up to 3 Olympic medals. Nobody thought of me as a freestyler at that level. And so it was a bit of a surprise. It was a bit of a long shot. And in fact, if I look at my Olympic results, my 200 freestyle that earned me a silver medal was by far my best performance because it so far exceeded what people expected of me. And it occurred 45 minutes after I won the 100-meter backstroke. So I became the first swimmer in history to win 2 individual swimming medals in the same day. Spitz and Phelps have never attempted that. So this was a real big deal that nobody saw coming, and it probably didn't matter to them as much as it mattered to me. But I look back at my silver medal with overjoyed. I was delighted to go over and congratulate Bruce Furness, the Olympic teammate and champion in that event, because I was happy for him and I was happy for me.
Going back to 72, 73 era, that was when you say you were just starting to break through, you've just missed the 72 Olympics. And then going on to your 4th defining moment, which was probably a couple of years after that, was when you were disqualified at US Nationals. Now, why was that so important to you?
Okay. In 1973, the very first World Swimming Championships was announced to take place in Belgrade, Yugoslavia. And the way the American team was selected was based on the results at the US National Championships. Now, in March of that year, I broke the American record in the short course backstrokes. So people thought, and I thought, I had a shot to be a backstroker on the American World Championship swim team. And in the 100-meter backstroke, I was the fastest qualifier. Now, because I was so tall, and because I swam freestyle a great deal, I often swam backstroke in the distance freestyle lanes in workout. And at the time, the backstrokers had to touch the wall with their hand, and many of them would bend over backwards and put an arch in their back to spring their legs out of the water. Because I swam thousands of yards in backstroke, and because I was so tall, I innovated a different kind of turn where I would merely touch the wall with my hand, and then my body would collapse. I would fold my knees toward my nose, and I would pirouette in the water, sitting on my rear end. It was a sit and spin turn. And it enabled me to do lots of laps in short course. I could swim, 10,000 yards short course and do all these turns, and I became relatively good at it. It wasn't a faster turn. It was about the same as the other turns, but the difference was my head was out of the water, and I could take a big lungful of air, and I could push off underwater, and I could surface and feel refreshed, whereas my opponents had been holding their breath for 4 seconds longer than me. So this was a not quite as innovative as the Dick Fosbury flop, but it was an innovation in swimming that worked for me. So here we are in the finals of the 100-meter backstroke at the US Nationals, and I'm the fastest qualifier in an era where the rules required that you touch the wall with your hand. So bang goes the gun. I swim as fast as I can for 47 meters, and then I prepare to do my turn, and I execute a very quick whip turn. As I come to the surface off the wall, I see the stroke and turn judge waving her hand. She did not think I touched the wall. I get to I'm the fastest swimmer. I'm the first to reach 100 meters. I get to the wall first, and everybody's applauding and everybody's cheering, and I look at my coach, and I shake my head, and I point to the other end of the pool with my thumb down. Well, he gets up, he runs over, and the turn judge is now meeting with the meet referee, and they're having a debate. And my coach comes running back to me, and he says, the turn judge thinks you didn't touch the wall. The meet referee thinks you did. Now, I knew that if I won the 100-meter backstroke, I would lead off the American medley relay, which was a virtual guaranteed gold medal at the World Championships. I also knew that the Olympic Games are all about sportsmanship and following the rules. And I looked at my coach and I said, Coach, I didn't touch the wall. And the debate ended. He went over, told the referee disqualified me, and I did not make the US World Championship team in 1973 in the 100 backstroke. I did qualify in the 200 backstroke, where I earned a bronze medal at the World Championships, and for me that was a great success. But it became a defining moment in my life because I was given the chance to demonstrate my commitment to the rules, the ideals of the Olympic movement. And I sacrificed an easy World Championship gold medal because I do believe, had I told the world that I touched, I think I would have been given the benefit of the doubt and would have been placed on the team. But in reality, I didn't touch. I didn't deserve to be on the team in the 100. And I look back at all the days of my swimming careers. The one race, the one moment of which I am most proud was the moment I fessed up to my own violation and disqualified myself from the World Championship team.
Wow, that's quite amazing that's of all the races you've done in your career, and that's the one that is right at the top of the list.
It's the one I'm most proud of. I think I'm more proud of character than I am of being able to swim quickly while on your back.
You mentioned the World Champs there being the first one in Belgrade. Was that still a great experience for you to kind of travel abroad and go to a big championships?
Yes, it was. It was the first multi-sport experience because the World Swimming Championships also included diving, water polo, and synchronized swimming. So it was at that trip, where I got to meet athletes from sports other than swimming. And though I never competed in the Pan Am Games or the World University Games or the Goodwill Games, that was my first introduction. And it really, I think, heightened my anticipation for being part of an Olympic team and living in the village and eating in the cafeteria and meeting athletes from other countries and other sports, which I think is the delight of the Olympic movement.
And then just in the build-up to 76, in those years between that, I guess you were just improving, and by the time 76 came round, you must have felt like this was your Olympics.
In 1974, the Americans and East Germans met in a swimming dual meet, and I defeated Roland Mathis in both the 100 and the 200, yet I did not break his world records. So come 1976, the showdown was being built up as quite a rivalry. Because he was the faster, but I had beaten him, and he was maybe post his prime. As it turned out, he had passed his prime, and he was dealing with a root canal or a wisdom teeth extraction or something that denied him his best results. But I have great respect for Roland Mathis, and frankly, in 2016, during the Olympics in Rio, Roland and his wife Daniela came to visit Los Angeles. And Roland and I sat in my living room on my couch, and we watched the Olympic backstroke races as dear friends in mutual respect and admiration. Roland won both backstrokes in 68 and in 72. And in Montreal, he won a bronze medal in the 100. And there's a wonderful story about how he used all his wiles to win the 100 backstroke. He literally false started twice. And in backstroke, nobody false starts. You're hanging onto the wall. But he jumped the gun twice so that at the time, the false starts would be charged to the field, and he literally slowed everybody down off the wall, which took away one of my stronger advantages. So he used all his weapons, a brilliant tactician and a gentleman's gentleman. He never tried to psych anybody out. And in fact, he was the first to come over and congratulate me when I broke his world record in the 100 backstroke during the semifinals of the Olympics. He chucks me under the chin and says, "Very fast." Those are the only two English words I ever heard him speak. Very fast. And it told me that he honored me, and yet the very next day he tried to beat me using all the tools to his discretion. So I have great respect for the man. He's no longer with us, but he remains in my heart as a dear, dear friend.
And obviously, you said the press were kind of bigging this up as the big head-to-head between the two of you. Like you said, he was the double Olympic champion in both backstroke events. But also, was there a little bit of a narrative of it being East versus West? Did you feel that kind of pressure of politics involved, or did you just leave that somewhere else?
I was aware at the time that the Soviets and the East Germans used sport to make a political point. That our athletes are winning against the capitalist athletes, and therefore communism is better than capitalism. I don't believe it carried any logical weight to me. Just because you swim quickly in the backstroke doesn't mean you'll make a good husband or father. So why does it mean your politics are better? I mean, it didn't carry water. But because they put so much emphasis on that, I knew what was important for their society for them to win. And that sort of maybe heightened my desire to win a little bit more. But frankly, at the Olympics, if the gold medal is not enough to heighten your desire, I don't think anything else matters.
Very good point. And then 1976, I guess, what was it like when you actually made the team? That first moment, you knew you'd booked your place, you were going to Montreal, and you were finally going to be an Olympian.
At the Olympic trials, my sights were still set on the Olympics. I had peaked and focused and trained to do very well at the Olympics. The question was, could I make the team? And it was a bit of a relief, but not a surprise. I tried out for the 400-meter freestyle, and I almost made that team. I didn't try out for the 1500. I was an American record holder in the mile the year before. By not making the 400 freestyle, the intervening 4 weeks of training allowed me to focus on my sprints, which probably improved my 200 freestyle as well.
But then I guess Montreal as a Games, your first Olympics, you're going there, you've said you love mingling with all the other athletes. What was it like being in the village and just seeing the whole spectacle right in front of your own eyes?
I still have a vivid memory of riding an elevator up the village dormitory. We lived on, the American team was placed on the 10th floor, I guess, and riding up the elevator, and behind me is a basketball player 6 inches taller than me. I'm 2 meters high. Next to me is a gymnast who comes up to my rib cage. And here's a wrestler with a cauliflower ear and a boxer, who's got, bumps on his head. And I'm amazed in looking at all this, and they're all speaking different languages. And because I'm a rather outgoing extrovert, in the cafeteria, I would take my tray and go visit and sit down across the table from somebody who couldn't even speak English. But we found a way to communicate. We smiled and we traded lapel pins, and after the games we traded jackets and stuff. And it was an absolute delight to think of myself in the middle of a village filled with the best in the world at a wide variety of different things. And the part that I remember was not the extraordinary talent and athleticism, but the ordinariness of these young men and women of different sizes and shapes who, with the help of mom and dad, find a way to be really good at a wide variety of different skills. You can win an Olympic gold medal by standing perfectly still and pulling a trigger or letting go of an arrow. You can be, if you're good at endurance, then run the marathon. If you're good at tumbling, be a gymnast. And all these different kinds of people who, frankly, other than the basketball players, most of them you wouldn't look twice at on the subway. They look ordinary. They're normal folks. And the ordinariness of these people is what I find so extraordinary about the Olympic Games. In America, we watch, NFL football. And these guys are 300 pounds, or NBA players are 7 feet tall. And they are extraordinary physical specimens. But at the Olympics, it's the ordinariness that touches my heart. And it's those stories of ordinary people overcoming adversity and triumphing against insurmountable odds that occur every Olympics. At every Olympic Games, there's always some upset victory, and there's always some disappointed champion. And that pleases me. The thought of that pleases me greatly.
And just in terms of your personal experience of those games and how you competed, and did you go to the opening ceremony, or were you racing too soon?
I swam the day after opening ceremony, so I did not march, but I was given tickets in the audience, and I sat in the stands where I could watch the athletes down below. And for most of the opening ceremony, I wished I had chosen to march. And because it was my only Olympics, I never marched in the opening ceremony. But in 1984, when the Games came to Los Angeles, I was invited by Peter Ueberroth to be one of the flag bearers of the big white Olympic flag. And so I did get the chance to march out the tunnel holding the flag, and then I hooked my corner onto the flagpole, and up it went, and here comes Rayford Johnson with the torch, and it was a very inspiring moment. But I never did participate in an opening ceremonies as an athlete.
I think most people would take the latter, to be honest. Yeah, and then the performances yourselves, obviously, 4 gold medals, and we've already mentioned that 1 silver. Did it go as well as expected? I mean, I know you were aiming for times as well. You were the first to break 2 minutes for the 200 backstroke. Were all of those things goals that you were just checking off a list?
To be candid with you, the 200 backstroke, I had trained to swim the distance in 1:57.5 seconds.
Wow.
And I obviously was nowhere close to that. That was the slowest. I missed my target by a greater percentage. And a couple of things may justify or explain that. Number one, it was at the end of my Olympic swimming career. I'd already swum four other races, or actually 8 other swims and 4 other medal events. So that may have had something to do with it. Also, the final in the 200 backstroke, I just wanted to get it out of the way. I was tired. I was emotionally down. I just wanted to win. So I don't think I swam the ultimate race. And my coach and I both agreed I could have been faster. But in retrospect, that winning time in 1976 would have won gold in 1988. So it was a pretty good time. And they changed the rules now, so you don't have to touch the wall with your hand. I can be pleased with that. There's no reason to be disappointed. I did as well as I could have at the time, I think.
And I guess in terms of all the other races, like the relays and all that, great to be part of a team that wins a gold medal at an Olympics.
In 1972, I watched Roland Mathis win the gold in the 100-meter backstroke, breaking, I think he went 56.5 or 56.4. At the time, I was 59.5. That was my best time in the 100 meters. And I said, what is Roland going to be doing in Montreal? How fast will he be able to go? And I extrapolated his winning times, and I guessed he could go 55.5. So 55.5 became my target in the 100-meter backstroke. Roland was off his best, but my winning time in Montreal was 55.49. I hit the mark. And the freestyle, I told you, exceeded my mark. The relay swims were good enough. So the games were a success for me. I was very, very happy with the result. And I had another year of collegiate swimming that followed the Olympics, so I never expected a professional career. Wheaties box endorsements or dancing with celebrities wasn't around in those days. I went back to school and finished my degree and got my psychology degree and helped USC win its 4th national collegiate title. And I had planned to retire when my university scholarship expired, and I did. No surprise. The big surprise was when a career in broadcasting made itself popular, made itself available, and so that allowed me to go to other Olympic Games, and I've been to 10 of them now, and I love them.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about what it was like when you'd won obviously 4 golds and the 1 silver, and you were you won the most medals at that Olympics for an individual athlete. But was there much press reaction when you got home? What was it like back then in the 70s? Was there quite, like you said, there's no Dancing with the Stars and things like that. So did you get any offers of media?
I wasn't allowed. You're not allowed to have an agent and swim in college. So I didn't even entertain those offers. I turned down the Johnny Carson show. Bruce Jenner got most of the attention and most of the endorsements. Nadia Comaneci was probably the favorite of those games, and she lived in Romania. Sugar Ray Leonard, the boxer, went on to a successful professional career, so he got some commercial endorsements, but I never planned on them. I never counted on them, so when they didn't come or when I didn't return those phone calls, I didn't consider it a loss. It was just part of life.
You just dropped a lot of names there. Are you still good friends with most of those athletes you just mentioned?
Probably the closest friends from the Montreal Olympics would be Bruce Furness, the swimmer who beat me in the 200, Dwight Stones, the high jumper who won the bronze in Montreal. He was the world record holder at the time. I've worked with Bart Conner and Nadia Comaneci as a broadcaster covering gymnastics, so we see them regularly. I ran into Caitlyn Jenner a couple of years ago at a celebrity event, but we seem to live in different social circles. But I'm still very connected to the Olympics as a broadcaster. I've just not covered only swimming. I've covered 30 different Olympic sports. And so I've gotten to know Dan Jansen and Mike Eruzione and Shannon Miller and many athletes, and I just love the Olympic movement. I'm as big an Olympic fan as I was an Olympic athlete.
So when you did kind of retire, how old were you? About 21?
20. Would have been 21, I guess. Yeah, 1977. 21.
I just can't imagine you've won 4 Olympic golds the year before and then that's it, you're done. I mean, I guess you still swam recreationally, but was there not the drive to kind of go on for a few more years?
Well, I don't think I ran away from swimming. I ran toward my next life. I realized that swimming could not carry me for 20, 30 years. It might carry me for another 4, but you know what? I need a job. I need to get income. I wanted to travel. I wanted to meet people. And as it turned out, had I stayed in the sport for another 4 years, I would have run right into the Moscow boycott and been not allowed to compete anyway. So as it turns out, perhaps the boycott benefited me because I was not replaced as America's multiple medal winning champion, and I got to be a celebrity for a little bit longer. I did have some commercial opportunities after I retired. I did some work with Speedo Swimwear and Minute Maid Orange Juice and was involved in the '84 Olympics in Los Angeles on the board of directors. So I had plenty of doors that opened for me after the fact, but I never thought I'd make a living as a swimmer, and I never did.
And apparently I read that you worked at Disneyland for a bit.
Well, my first job after college with a psychology degree, it was my father who woke up in the middle of the night with the epiphany that the company Disney had the same all-American image that his son had. So he called me up and he said, "John, have you ever thought about working at Disneyland?" And I love the theme park and I love the company and I love the entertainment that they provided. So I asked for a job and was given a management trainee position. And I worked there for 6 months. I didn't have to shave my mustache for the Olympics, but I did have to shave my mustache for Disney because at the time they had very strict grooming rules. You were considered a part of the cast. If you walked through the Disneyland theme park wearing a Disneyland ID badge, you had to look clean cut. So I shaved off my mustache for Disney and I worked there for 7 or 8 months. But then the phone calls began inviting me to be a broadcaster or do motivational speaking and teaching America. That was my secondary career, was taking the life lessons I'd learned in the pool and learning how to apply them in business or in the arts or in the rest of your life. And I was a rather successful motivational speaker because I would bring not just my experiences, but the experiences of Nadia Comaneci and Bruce Jenner and Edwin Moses and Greg Louganis. And I'd tell those stories to corporate America about how you can overcome obstacles or set your goals or enjoy working hard or building a team spirit. And so I did a lot of that. And those invitations were more lucrative and became more numerous. So Disney finally gave me a sabbatical. They said, "John, go ahead and harvest the field to your heart's content. And when you're done, come on back and rejoin the team." 17 years later, I was still doing my own thing, and they sent me a final severance check. And then as it turns out, Disney bought ABC Television. ABC Television covers the Rose Parade. Because I live in Pasadena, I cover the Rose Parade for ABC Television, so I'm now a Disney employee once again.
It all comes back full circle in the end, doesn't it?
It's weird. Yeah, it's weird.
Obviously, you've mentioned 1984, and you were part of the organising committee for those Olympics, and like you've already said, you took the flag into the opening ceremony. What was that whole experience like, and how did you feel those games went?
Well, when I broke my collarbone in the diving board accident, I volunteered as an assistant coach, and I learned about the sport of swimming from the coach's perspective. By being on the board of directors of the LA Organizing Committee, I learned about the Olympics from the organizer's perspective. It's different than the athlete's perspective. It's different than the spectator's perspective. It's different than the IOC's perspective. That being a part of the organizing committee, you have limited opportunity to generate revenue and a guaranteed termination the day after closing ceremony. That whole committee disbands. And there's managing venues, there's managing athletes, there's managing spectators, and there's managing expectations. And I learned a lot. Peter Ueberroth ran those games, and he innovated a lot of ways that put the Olympic movement on a very secure financial track. He innovated the Olympic torch relay as a fundraiser and a friend raiser. He made it a spectacle. So there were a lot of things that I learned about the Olympic movement. And as I say, I'm an Olympic fan, but to learn about organizing the games, it gives me a great deal of sympathy or empathy with the Tokyo Organizing Committee right now, right? Because I can see it from their point of view. I remember the athletes' point of view as well. I don't discount that. But being a part of the organizing committee gave me a different perspective, a valuable perspective that I treasure to this day.
And alongside all your kind of media commitments that you've been doing, like you've been to 10 games and you've obviously worked with loads of Olympians. And talk a little bit about how you still feel connected to the Olympics now, because you kind of are involved in the Alumni Association for the American team, and you obviously must be still embedded in Olympic life every day now.
Pretty much. I'm the chairman or president of 3 Olympic nonprofit organizations. I put Olympians in front of crowds. I put money into Olympians' pockets if they've fallen on hard times. I'm sorry, I don't put money. The organization puts money into the pockets of Olympians. We find training grants for Olympic hopefuls in Southern California, a lot of those things. And I take a great deal of pleasure out of that, because remember, love is the willingness to sacrifice for somebody else's benefit. And so I consider that nonprofit service a willing sacrifice. And it gives me a good sense, and I'm still connected to the Olympic movement. I'm happy to report that at the end of 2020, I was voted by the Olympic alumni to sit on the US Olympic Committee Board of Directors. So I will be going to Tokyo with the US Olympic Committee with an official credential, in official capacity. And so I'm looking forward to being able to be of service to bring, remember, I like the different perspectives, the athlete perspective, the organizer perspective. I think that the current athlete perspective is different than the alumni athlete perspective. Looking back, I have a different opinion. I still feel that I'm a stakeholder in the success of the Olympic movement in a different way than a competing athlete might be, and in a different way than the broadcasters will be. But we're all cheering for the success of the Olympic movement, and I feel like I'm a part of that.
And how do you feel at the moment? There's a lot of debate going on about Olympians, and obviously the Olympics don't pay athletes, and I know there's things like Rule 40 has been in the news a lot. And do you feel like Olympians are really actually making enough money out of their success?
Remember, I came out of the era where Olympians were not allowed to make any money, and we were able to be successful. And I'm sorry, I'm going to get a little philosophical here. The purpose of getting into Olympic sport is not to get an endorsement. The purpose of being involved in Olympic sport or organized athletics is to teach character lessons that'll help us be successful later in life. The goal is not to be the best runner. The goal is to gather the best possible character elements that will guarantee success later in life. So putting kids through hard work, forcing them to abide by the rules, listening to authority in a relationship with a coach, doing your homework, having passion, overcoming obstacles, all of these life skills are available whether or not you make money. And in fact, in my opinion, the making of the money might have taken the focus off of what I consider to be the goal of sport and put it somewhere else. So I'm not so sure that making money has been a good thing. That's my perspective. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I don't believe that athletes ought to be denied the right to make money. But if that's the only measure of success, I was the best in the world in 4 different events. I didn't make a penny. The last athlete drafted in American football makes $1 million a year. Does that make him a better athlete? Does it make him a better guy? I never thought so. So, okay, I'm a little bit, old-fashioned when it comes to looking at that. Here's another thought that I think I probably can share. When Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fists on the award stand in Mexico City, they became pariahs in our country. They were vilified, they were hated, and they suffered a huge consequence. They were kicked out of the Olympic Village. They almost lost their medals. They suffered a huge consequence for standing up for their beliefs. Athletes today want to stand up for their beliefs, but don't want to pay any consequence. They don't want to have any penalty associated with it, and they want to be considered heroes. And I'm not sure I can call somebody a hero if they risk nothing to make a point. Now, I'm not saying they should be denied the right to make a point. I believe if you feel that strongly and you want to take a knee or raise a fist or hold up a flag and you're willing to suffer the negative consequences for doing it, then hey, good for you. Good for you. You feel that strongly. I'm proud of you. But I don't think you get a Medal of Valor storming the beaches at Normandy if the German guns are silenced. So that's one thought when it comes to money. I don't mind people making money, but I wish they don't make that the only measure of their success.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point. The Olympics should always just be about, like you say, striving to be your best.
Sure. Being as good as you can be.
Just going back to your defining moments, your fifth defining moment, you mentioned when you were around 45 years old and you were asked to define your life in one single word. Why was that such an important moment?
Well, I think that many athletes will define themselves now as being an athlete. Michael Phelps defined himself as being a swimmer, and when he was no longer a swimmer, he didn't know what he was. I attended a seminar, not as a speaker, but as an attendee, and the speaker challenged the audience to simplify how you view yourself. Don't try to be all things to all people, but if you were to choose one word to define how you see yourself, how you want to be seen, I wrote the word teacher. I'm not a teacher. I don't teach in classrooms. As a motivational speaker, I suppose, but I thought of myself, I want to share what knowledge I may have so that it benefits other people. Many Olympic athletes are delighted to think of themselves as motivational speakers because they hope that their experience will excite the audience. I get invited to talk about myself. Isn't that great? So I go in and I'll tell my story and tell them about what I did, and that ought to make them like me a lot. Well, that's not a motivational speaker. That's not a teacher. When I looked back at my career as a broadcaster, I wanted to share with the viewers at home the stories of what was going on in the pool, hopefully allowing that to benefit the audience. So when I viewed of myself as a teacher, it inspired in me the desire to write a little more, to communicate a little more often, and to think about what I was going to say. I think a year or two prior to that, I had a life lesson taught to me by a broadcast producer. If you've ever been in a television truck, there's 16 cameras and 16 monitors on the wall, and one person has to decide which camera will tell the story that he needs told at that moment. And it's a very challenging job because you're talking to the tape guys and you're talking to audio and you're counting down to commercial and you're talking to the talent. And I asked him, what makes a really good television producer? He says, you got to be an ideal communicator. He says a good communicator is easy to understand, but a great communicator is impossible to misunderstand. And when he told me that lesson, I said, wow, that's an important distinction. And maybe I can use that as a motivational speaker. So when I'm trying to make my points, I really want to choose my words carefully. A lot of younger speakers think that if you're a speaker, you use as many words as possible and speak as quickly as possible so you can get as many words into the hour as you can. It's like bullets in a machine gun. But I believe that a good communicator uses words the way a carpenter uses tools. You want the right tool. You don't want a chisel for a screwdriver. You want to use the right word to make the right point at the right time. And so anyway, those are the skills that I believe. And coming from my Christian faith, I look back and think about the greatest teacher that ever was Jesus Christ. And he didn't talk about himself. He didn't lecture. He used parables. He told stories that let people learn life lessons. So anyway, when I thought of myself as a teacher, I saw sort of a symbiotic relationship, a similarity, if you will, with the greatest teacher of all. I'll never be that good, but I want to be a good teacher. I want to share ideas and thoughts that are complicated, but are helpful to the audience. And your audience today will be the judge if I'm good at that or not.
Well, I already feel inspired, so you've already worked your magic on me. Just looking ahead, what is next for you, John? Where do you see your life going over the next few years?
Well, I'm closer to the end of my life than I am to the beginning of my life. My daughter is fully grown. I hope to be a grandparent someday, but it may not happen. I'm very happily married to an amazing woman who challenges me every day, so I don't think I will coast into the final days of my life. Being a member of the board of the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee is a responsibility I take very seriously. COVID has brought an absolute end to any of the motivational speaking conferences and seminars that used to take place, so I don't think I'll be providing value in that arena to the same degree. I have a third book that should be published this spring filled with Olympic trivia, but more than that, the stories behind Olympic trivia. So I'm a storyteller, and hopefully that'll be something that the public will enjoy. The writing of books has been a pleasure because I know that I'll be teaching long after I'm gone.
Yeah, books will be there forever.
Yeah, that's my hope.
And then just looking further ahead, we've already had Olympics in LA that you worked on in '84. What can people expect from 2028 when the Olympics return to Los Angeles?
Well, I know that there's going to be, the Olympic movement will change. It'll change in Tokyo, it'll change in Beijing, it'll change in Paris. It'll be different than it used to be. And Los Angeles has proven in 1984 and in 1932 as well. Los Angeles proved that they could innovate in the Olympic arena. We invented the Athletes' Village. And I believe that Los Angeles will innovate new additions to the Olympic movement that I think will amaze and delight the world. We're still a long ways away, but I think the Olympic movement is worth fighting for. It's worth saving. And it deserves to happen. And when it happens in your town, the entire community benefits for decades after. That's why a city ought to host the Olympics, not just for television revenue, but because it benefits the community at large. And yes, if you want to build a new airport or hotels and that benefit or subway systems, that benefits the community as well. But Los Angeles already has much of that. The real benefit is the Olympic legacy that lives on after the Games.
And you mentioned you're hoping to go to Tokyo this year if all goes ahead that we get an Olympics this year. What are you looking forward to this year in Tokyo? Who are you looking out for? What events are you looking forward to seeing? And which athletes can we look forward to performing in Tokyo?
There's a lot of new names coming up in the sport of swimming. Katie Ledecky, of course, is the big name that I think, and I'm enamored with her for many reasons. Not just is she a good swimmer, she's a smart lady. She plays piano. She's interesting to talk to. I think that she will be a wonderful role model, and I like to see that. There will be other people coming up in the ranks. The American team had 10 Olympic gold medalists in Rio, only one of whom retired. So, we have a very strong team that should do very well, and a bunch of youngsters coming up. And I love the cohesion. The American Olympic team seems to be very close-knit. They cheer for each other. They care about each other, and they do well as a team. And that pleases me because that's one of the things that pleased me about Montreal, the unity that we showed.
I'm just going to ask you now to pick one of your 5 defining moments, which I'll just recap for you. You went to Olympia age 10. That was your first defining moment and was inspired by the Olympics. Second one was that comment you had from your coach, Coach Hastings, which kind of inspired you. Third one was when the day you accepted Christ and how your faith impacted your career and your life. And your fourth one was when you were disqualified at US Nationals. And the last one was when you had to define yourself by that single word and you chose teacher. If you had to choose just one of those, which would you say is the one that's defined your life the most?
I think if I took one of them off the list, my life would be much less satisfying had I not become a Christian. So I would say that is probably the ultimate of my defining moments because, I defined myself as a teacher and I learned about teaching from Jesus and okay. So yeah, I think that that's probably the one, although they all are significant. And people say, what makes a great Olympic champion? And I say, well, what's the one essential ingredient in a good birthday cake recipe? Well, it's not just sugar or flour or eggs, it's all of them. So I think that the person I am is a result of all of those defining moments and many, many more. And I don't regret any of them. They're all important, and we should embrace all of our differences and all of the different moments in our lives, and not just choose to define ourselves by one.
If you were able to go back and speak to that 10-year-old who went to Greece and was inspired, what would you say to that 10-year-old John?
It's worth it. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth it. If you desire to become an Olympian, there's a price to be paid. And unlike dining at a fine restaurant where the bill comes after dessert is served, in life, you pay the price in advance. So I would tell that 10-year-old kid, I'm delighted you want to be an Olympian. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. To try to be the best you can be at something is in its own reward. And even if you win a silver, or even if you win a bronze, or don't even make the team, if you know that you did as well as you could, you mastered your potential, then there's a great deal of satisfaction in that. And that's that. I don't want to die having regrets, and the only thing I regret would be not doing the best I could do.
And obviously, throughout this chat, we've mentioned the Olympics has obviously been the main thread through it all. How much does the Olympics mean to you, and how important is the Olympics in your life?
Well, I suppose if the IOC were to implode and the Games were to cease, I would be very, very sad, but I don't think my life would come to an end. I think that I would find other things to do with my life, but I hope it doesn't. I think the Olympic movement, the ideals of the movement, have a great deal of potential. And I would hope that my future grandchild would discover that potential, whether in sport or arts or science or whatever, but I do believe that amateur athletics competing for the ideals, not the money, can produce a better generation of adults that'll make the world better. And that's what Pierre de Coubertin intended of the Olympic movement. He was an educator. He was a teacher, right? He believed the Olympic movement could enhance international goodwill and education and health and all those good things. And I feel the same way.
Well, I think I can speak for everyone listening already that you've probably inspired many people today. We all feel motivated to go and take on the world. So thank you so much, John, for being a guest on My Defining Moments. I've really, really enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you for giving me the platform to teach.
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel really inspired after listening to John there. I mean, what a guy. What a legend. So pleased I got him on the show, and yeah, really interesting man, really interesting life story, and I love that he still loves the Olympics. That's it for another episode of My Defining Moments. I'll be back very soon with more episodes. If you like the podcast, don't forget to leave a comment or a review, and obviously subscribe. I'm on all the major podcast suppliers. You can find me on social media at ChrisBrownSport if you have any comments or questions. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you soon.